Good morning, everyone. We're so glad to see you here on this very special Sunday. My name is Jane Dutton. I'm one of the adult faith formation people, and I was lucky enough to organize this series on awakening compassion. Last week we had Monica Warline is here, and this week we have the amazing Dr. Jennifer Griggs. And it's so funny because we are very active together on LinkedIn and sharing resources, but haven't really seen each other in person in a couple of years. So I am just so glad that she said yes. So just a couple of minutes, or just a couple of sentences, really, just to describe this extraordinary woman and the path, a little bit about the path that's brought her here. She has a MD and a master's in public health from public health. She is an oncologist, a researcher, a professor, a mother, and a wife. She has also taken this just remarkable different path to become a leadership coach for healthcare professionals. And she has a very beautiful website. So it's jennifergriggs.com, right? So if you go to her website, it tells more about her story. But she describes what she's trying to do with these healthcare professionals is helping them live with joy and purpose. And she has an enduring commitment to the idea of human dignity, and has actually a dignity lab that she may talk about. She's also got a wonderful podcast. So if you go to her website, right, you can get to her podcast. But we're really lucky to have her here today talking about such an important topic of self-compassion. So Jennifer, thank you for being here.
Thank you. I feel like I'm the lucky one to be back in my church. We live about an hour away, so I'm often online. But it's so wonderful to see people I've known for years and to be welcomed with such an introduction. I have to say, I'm now a little intimidated by myself because that sounds pretty amazing. I'm just a person. I gave a talk last week on imposter syndrome to faculty at a children's hospital, and I was like, as I worked through the whole thing, who am I to give this talk on imposter syndrome? And I have to tell you that the word self-compassion evokes in me quite a bit of resistance. And I don't know if any of you have had that sense of resistance. If you have, just raise your hand.
It feels self-indulgent.
It feels self-indulgent. In fact, when I typed to my daughter this morning on text that I was giving a talk on self-compassion, it auto-filled in selfishness. I had to correct it, of course. Isn't that interesting that my phone thinks self should end with ishness? And it's so interesting to me that we heard last week from Monica Warline, her wonderful talk on what compassion is. Compassion is noticing suffering and responding, paying attention to, and then doing something. The something doesn't have to be a physical action or speaking up. It can be holding presence. Why is self-compassion any different? Really, it's just directing that compassion, that noticing suffering and responding. I thought it would be worthwhile defining suffering the way I do, and it may be different from yours, Monica, so let me know. Eric Cassels, one of the founders of palliative care, describes suffering as anything that threatens the intactness of the whole. Suffering is anything that threatens the intactness of the whole. So this could be somebody saying a harsh word to you. It could be being excluded from a conversation about your own self. It could be a physical injury. It could be being interrupted repeatedly by the same people at the meeting that you go to. That's threatening the intactness of the whole. Does that make sense for suffering? Because that's going to be relevant as we go ahead. What I'm going to do in the time we have, and we're going to end on time at 11:30, but I am planning to stay afterwards. So only if you have to leave should you leave, unless you want to leave, and that's fine. I also need to say I have an allergic cough. I am not COVID positive, I'm not sick, but if I start coughing, please don't be alarmed. I'm not a vector, I just have allergies. So I'm going to define what self-compassion is. We'll talk about what self-compassion is not. We want to address that self-indulgence, self-centeredness, softness. We'll talk about two different types of self-compassion, and you'll see the parallels to compassion that's other-focused as well. And we'll talk about what it's good for. What can it do for you? What can it do for others? And then I'll take you through a guided practice, a self-compassion meditation. Sound good? Okay, everybody ready? All right, you have a sheet in front of you. And on it are some boxes we'll be filling in. I spend all day, every day on the computer and looking at PowerPoints. So I didn't do a PowerPoint today. I thought your slides were beautiful, Monica, and I kind of wish that I had made a PowerPoint because I was inspired. So my hope is at the conclusion of the session, these are my objectives, that you will be able to define self-compassion and what it's not. You'll be able to measure your own level of self-compassion using a validated tool. If you are the type of person who is QR code savvy, there's a QR code on the back of this handout, and it will do it for you. Can just go through it and calculate your self-compassion score. If you don't like QR codes, the handout you have will help you do it on your own, but there's some math involved, and I have math phobia, about which I'm extremely self-compassionate. We'll talk about the three components of self-compassion according to Kristen Neff and Chris Germer. There are other scholars in compassion, but you will hear a lot about Neff and Germer. It's just really important to know that they don't own self-compassion, but they are the leading researchers and publishers in self-compassion. And I'll describe a controversy. There's some nastiness going on in the literature about self-compassion, which I find fascinating. Real nastiness, like Neff contends, Neff claims, which isn't a nice way to say that she states it, right? Or I respectfully disagree. So I just love that kind of like other stuff going on in the background. And then we will practice self-compassion. And I have on my website, which is jennifergriggs.com, a self-compassion meditation and other meditations as well. And the Dignity Lab is my podcast, and that also has a whole episode on self-compassion. I think it just dropped today, maybe. So it was, inspired by this. So because I want people on the live stream to be able to hear, I will read the definition of self-compassion. I was going to have one of you read. Maybe I will. Is somebody willing to read, and I'll pass you the mic? Who said sure? Oh, super, Cindy. Thank you.
What is self-compassion? Being open to and moved by one's own suffering, experiencing feelings of caring and kindness toward oneself, taking an understanding, non-judgmental attitude toward one's inadequacies and failures, and recognizing that one's experience is part of the common human experience. Kristen Neff.
Thank you. Beautifully read. So thinking about that, you have on your page, and I hope everybody has a pen, you have a box that asks, what's it even good for? So what I would love you to do, looking at that definition and your own experience with compassion and self-compassion, we'll spend just a couple minutes writing. Again, death by PowerPoint is just prevalent. It's an epidemic. So this is a way you get to think a little bit about self-compassion and what it's good for. And if you want to, you can move on to for others. What does it do? And then we'll go over the research. I know some of you are still writing, and I do hate to interrupt. I have handouts that I'll give you at the end, so don't leave without one that has what the research shows. So what I'm going to read you now is written on what you'll take home with you, so you don't have to worry you're missing it. The reason I don't give out full handouts ahead of time is because after years of being a professor, people take the handout, flip through it, ruffle through it. Nobody's actually present. So that's why I don't tend to hand out complete workbooks. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah, so I'm going to share with you the research. You'll take this home with you, so don't worry. Research has shown that self-compassion reduces stress, anxiety, and depression. That's pretty powerful. It improves emotional resilience and coping skills. Think about people in your life, if not your own. Let's say you cope perfectly and you have no depression or stress or anxiety, but you have children or you have parents, friends, neighbors, coworkers. Think about what it can do for them. Sometimes it's easier, right? We don't want to be selfish or self-indulgent, so sometimes the best way to learn about this is to think about your children, but it's also for you too. So it can actually enhance motivation and personal growth, which is so interesting, isn't it? When we think about self-compassion, we think about this gentle compassion. Self-compassion, just like compassion, means being in action. And so when we are self-compassionate, there are two kinds. There's the soft and there's the fierce compassion. Fierce compassion, which looks actually the same, accepts us. It may not accept our behavior. If we don't do well on a test and we say, that's okay, you're perfect just the way you are, you don't need to change, how are we to be motivated? But true self-compassion is about being in action. That's the part of compassion we don't want to forget when we think about self-compassion. So it actually means making up for past mistakes. It actually means taking accountability. We accept ourselves. We may not accept what we failed at. And all of us fails. If we're trying, we fail, right? If we're not trying, maybe we won't. If we just sit sessile, like a bump on a log, maybe we won't fail. But that's not what life is about. So it enhances motivation and personal growth. It promotes healthier behaviors and long-term well-being. That fierce self-compassion in us can say, what do I need in this moment? I need to eat healthier. I need to sleep better. Maybe I need to stop smoking. Maybe I need to re-examine my relationship with alcohol. Maybe I need to learn how to swim or start movement. I don't like exercise, so I call it movement. I really hate exercise. I love movement. And it can provide a more stable sense of worth. The reason that's important is because many of us depend on other people to tell us that we're worthy. We outsource our dignity. Our dignity is our inherent worth. The worth we have the minute we're little fresh babies that really have a net negative, I would argue. Babies don't really do anything to earn their worth. They just are worthy. Right? They pee and they poo and they cry and they keep us up. They don't even smile when they're first born, but nobody would argue that they have worth. At what age do we have to do something to be of worth? I haven't figured that out yet, but it happens. So it can help our sense of self-worth and not be outsourcing our dignity and needing other people to tell us we matter. So what else do you have on your list? What did I miss? Yes.
It can reduce self-consciousness, which can be a significant barrier in communication.
I'll repeat that for everybody. It can reduce self-consciousness, that sense of always being aware of oneself, and maybe that narrow lane that we allow ourselves to be in, that we have to look a certain way or act a certain way. Maybe we can let go of ourselves a little because we have that reservoir. I love that. Thank you for that contribution.
Worrying about what other people are thinking of
Yes.
us and stuff like that, it can set you free from it.
Setting us free from worrying about what other people think of us. That sounds like true freedom. Thank you. Anybody else? Yes.
I wrote, relieve the self-imposed pressure to be perfect, which gives me courage to try new things, do what I can with what I have. And goof-ups are learning experiences,
I love that. You're describing an antidote to perfectionism.
which I wasted my whole youth
Yes.
trying to be perfect. Not worth it, guys.
I'm a recovering perfectionist, and I have found self-compassion to be the most helpful thing for me in my recovery. And when I speak to senior physicians, their biggest struggle, besides lacking vision and purpose and being lost and having their dignity violated, is perfectionism. And that is a source of suffering, right? It threatens our intactness, the intactness of the whole being. Thank you for that. And it allows us to take risks, right? And it allows us to try new things. It's beautiful. The minute we stop learning, I feel like we should die. Like, if there's nothing left to learn, I guess we can serve, but even then we're learning. All right. Oh, yes, one more.
Self-compassion gives us a traveled path to follow when things are tough and we must start.
Did everybody hear that? I'll repeat it for our live stream folks, but it gives us a path to follow when life is tough. Self-compassion is most important when we're under stress. You know, if we're at a church picnic and everything's great and our car is legally parked and we don't have to be anywhere, we don't need self-compassion. But when we're running late, somebody's on our tail, they cut us off. You know, there's a difficult conversation from Wednesday that's still sticking in our craw. That's when self-compassion can work. Thank you. Let's move on to what can it do for others. It's, you know, we think about selfishness, says my phone, and self-indulgence and self-pity. What can it do for other people?
I think that true active self-compassion that you're describing, Jennifer, helps us and negotiate with others about the proper stance of taking relationship when we're working in really broken systems like the ones you're talking about, so that we don't personally and as people take on the blame for the institutional brokenness.
Did everybody hear that? Yes, I'll say it, though not nearly as eloquently as Monica, so forgive me and correct me, that self-compassion, fierce self-compassion, can help us be in relationship with others, especially in systems that are broken. It can help us see what's ours to carry and not ours to carry, and it can also give us the bravery to speak up, if not on our own behalf, on that of others. Fierce self-compassion can help us say, a boundary was crossed, and not just with me, but in this entire system where all the isms are in place, where there's been bullying or violations of dignity, not just of myself, but of others. Absolutely. How did I do? Okay, thank you. That feels really good. So the research shows it increases our capacity for compassion towards others. Now, you've often heard, and it's even on my Instagram feed, that you can't pour from an empty cup. I actually disagree with that. I think you can pour from an empty cup because I think our cup is filled by God. When I would sit with my patients and tell them that they were going to die, and I only stopped practicing 6 years ago, I never felt drained because I didn't feel that love was coming from my finite love. I felt I was a channel. I feel that way with my children. I feel that way when I sit with anybody suffering. So I never burned out because I feel you can pour. You can be a through channel. You know, that the cup is sort of a finite space. And I believe that God fills us up. So I understand you can't pour from an empty cup, and I actually said it on my particular podcast episode, but I think it is true that you can be compassionate for others and have zero compassion for yourself. I just don't know if that's the way we want to live. That sounds like a life of suffering, and I don't know that God wants us to suffer. So I do believe you can pour from an empty cup. It's just that that's not my wish for you. It's not my wish for you that you be running on fumes, that your tank is at empty and there's no refueling station in sight. It improves relationship quality. How many of you have said to somebody, I'm such an idiot. I'm so stupid. What is wrong with me? I say, what is wrong with me? Probably 3 times a week. And I got to pull out self-compassion. So we have these things we may not have grown up with hearing compassionate words, right? If we were shamed as children or young adults or in our first job or in our partnerships, we may not be used to compassion, hearing self-compassion. So it may be that we say these things, but this can put us in a position where we violate our own dignity and we allow other people to do that. So I believe self-compassion can help us in relationships. It can help us be true and whole, which means other people don't have to constantly be fixing us. That's that codependent relationship. And that we don't make ourselves a doormat. Does that make sense to everybody? So I think compassion for ourselves can help us have adult, meaningful, whole, dignified relationships. If I've triggered any of you, I see you. And I know that these are things that all of us have faced, these difficult relationships. And I don't mean to bring those up in a way that isn't compassionate. For caregivers, that's all of you. For anybody in a caring profession, and if you're a leader, you're a carer. If you're a parent, if you're a child, if you're a Stephen minister, if you're here in this church, you are in a caregiving role. If you're a nurse, it helps reduce burnout. And I believe it's because we set some boundaries and because we're refilling. And that might come from God, and it may come from self-compassion. And I think that Jesus would want us to see ourselves as fearfully and wonderfully made. We are fearfully and wonderfully made. It enhances our ability to take responsibilities for our actions and to make amends, which sounds counterintuitive, but actually, if one can have compassion for oneself, it's actually easier to feel whole and well-resourced, to say, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. This was the impact of what I did. How can I make us whole again? Because we're refilling, we're not defend and deny. We're not running on fumes. And this is one of the things that I see in myself as a leader is I actually embrace taking responsibility for my mistakes because I am so interested in relationships and in connectedness. So for me, this has been an amazing tool. We're going to have you fill out your self-compassion evaluation. The scale we're using is Kristen Neff's scale. There is controversy because what Kristen Neff has done is takes them all together and comes up with a score, as if these things are like a thermometer. So the self-judgment and the self-kindness and the mindfulness are able to cancel one another out. Critics contend that they actually should be taken separately, so that the positives and the harsher should be viewed separately. They should be viewed as protective versus harmful. The scale you'll get if you use the QR code puts them all together and does the reverse scoring. As you fill out yours, you'll notice that the scale changes halfway through because it's supposed to be reverse scored, where 5 becomes a 1, and that's just too much to me on a Sunday morning, so I tried to make it really easy. So I'll give you a few minutes. When you're done, if you want to look up, that would help. And if the QR code's on the back, if you want to do it that way. And some of you may have already finished. Do we have any writing implements? I will give you my favorite pen. And if you take it, be compassionate. It's totally okay.
I have some more other people.
Thanks for repeating and paraphrasing, because no one further away than this will not go into the stream.
Yeah, I know. Just the one. Yeah.
Little, come up on the word, I try.
I encourage myself to. How about that?
Well, it just seems like it, yeah.
I think it's just encourage myself to.
Well,
Yeah.
no, I don't,
Yeah.
I think that's maybe not the best word to use in this situation.
Maybe. I can't change the scale. It's been
I
validated.
know that.
Yeah.
I'm not
Yeah.
blaming you for
Yeah,
it.
no,
but
thank
it's
you for
just-
sharing
it's
your
curious to
experience.
me that
Yeah.
would be the choice to use, because it's really a lot of effort put into
Yeah.
this. which-
Yeah. Let me know if you come up with a better one. Because I want to honor your feeling.
No,
Yeah.
it is, I don't think about these things much,
Yeah.
but I'm, yeah.
Thank you. It's good to see you.
You know, I've always got a lot of self-reflection. I'm in the Swiss Alps, race like Fiamma,
I want to hear about
and all
that.
you know, the things that you're programmed with and how you change your programming and just learning.
That would take me 5
this-
years, I think.
But a whole month.
Yeah.
To meditate on the three things God's given us to know ourselves,
Yeah.
or to know Him. Nature, the Bible, and our own lives. It was, yeah.
Sounds wonderful.
So this is kind of like
Yeah.
the too mechanical for me.
It's not sitting with you. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm sure everybody else is probably cluing in, but I just got a little triggered by that would I try.
Yeah. It looks like everybody's almost done. Is that true? All right, so there are no norms for this scale. There's no average, or there's something like your self-compassion is terrible and you're in the bottom 5%. But it's been broken up. Oh, aren't you lovely? Thank you. But it's been broken up into the scale that's at the very bottom, the interpretation. So if you're between 1 and 2.49, that's low levels of self-compassion. If you're 2.5 to 3.5, you're moderate. And if you're 3.5 to 5, you have high levels of self-compassion. If you notice, so in the scale that is the validated scale, these are intermixed, and then you have to reverse score some of them. But I liked responding to the author of the article who said they should be viewed separately. So the self-kindness, that is protective, and that can protect you against the slings and arrows and shame and all the other messages we get growing up and in the world today. And if you see the side that you're high on, the kindness side, you can see you're strong in that area. So it's just helpful, I think, for people to see where they are. Were you surprised? Was anybody surprised at their score? Jane?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, I did go to a self-compassion workshop with my daughter because I thought she wasn't self-compassionate. And then I did the scale, and then I realized, oh, she's learning this lack of self-compassion from me. So I'm always surprised. I know about this, but I still find it hard to be self-compassionate.
Jane just shared, and thank you for sharing, that she took her daughter to a self-compassion workshop in the hope of helping her daughter, and realized how low her self-compassion is, that our children learn from us. And when we learn something new at a different age, we actually have to talk about it and live it more deliberately than we would if they were growing up as children and they see it imprinted. So with my children, when I have done something wrong, I will tell them, or I had a difficult conversation. Somebody mansplained burnout to me the other day when I was in New Orleans, and I called her up and she said, he's mansplaining to you, which I hadn't noticed. Does everybody know what that is? Okay. I can tell you, you can email me. If you don't, I'll explain it. Or I could have some man explain it if you want. But you're volunteering. Excellent. Thank you. Thanks for stepping up, because I'm just a girl, Thank you for the laugh. And then I walked her through my self-compassion. I had to show her. She actually came to a workshop with Kristen Neff once with me, and everybody there was our age, and nobody knew how to get the video to start. So she hopped up and got it all started, and we all watched it together. So she's seen this, but she didn't hear it growing up. She heard, what an idiot. I'm so stupid, from my mouth. from me. Not I messed up and it's okay. She heard all the bad stuff, and it takes so long to counter that. And so if you are doing this work for only other people, that seems worth it to me. And again, I hope some of it spreads to you. All right, so now you know your self-compassion score. The little text box on the back of your handout says what gets in the way of self-compassion, and I do want to do the meditation together, so I'd love you just to think about this, but I'll tell you what I know gets in the way based on the literature and talking with people and all the work that Neff and Germer and others have done is we think if we are self-compassionate, one of my clients told me this, if I am self-compassionate, I won't work hard anymore. If I'm self-compassionate, I'll be lazy and I'll let things slide. So for her, self-criticism was her motor. And she was worried if she practiced self-compassion that all of a sudden she wouldn't be the high-achieving physician, investigator, teacher, everything she was. And we worked through it. And she actually is amazing and motivated. And now she's inspired not by self-loathing and a not enoughness, but by the purpose that she has. Her purpose is to serve and to contribute to knowledge for children with leukemia. So she now uses her purpose, not, she's black, so I don't want to say what I was about to say. I was about to say a hot poker. But, that's what she was using. She'd internalized that shaming of herself. And that's hard to see, isn't it? And my guess is some of you see it in yourselves or in people that you love. Athletes who practice self-compassion actually perform better. They're more motivated. I accept myself and where I am, and this is what I'm going to work on. Not being a different person, but working on my skills. Being a better swimmer. I need to work on my form. So does that make sense? If we strip away the shame and the self-criticism, what's left is actually joy. Joy in the work. Whether our work is being with our children or our parents or being in our communities. There's a lot of work to be done. Let's see. So several factors can inhibit our ability. Fear of becoming lazy or falling behind. Believing that self-criticism is necessary for success. And this is the last one. Being concerned is being selfish. Perfectionism is another one that can make it hard for us, and unfamiliarity with compassion. If we're not used to hearing it, it's why we come to series like this. It's why we listen to Monica if we haven't seen compassion, empathy in action. It's just so strange to us. And we often want nothing more than not to change. This actually does take some change. It really does take some change in how we talk. It requires being mindful. The 3 elements, and that's a thing you can fill in, are self-kindness, common humanity, and mindfulness. You are not alone in your suffering. You are not alone in your flaws. You are not alone in being imperfect. In fact, if we were all perfect, wouldn't it be so boring? We'd all be the same, and it would be so boring. So self-kindness is how we talk to ourselves. Common humanity is realizing that suffering is part of life. Suffering is part of our common human experience. We cannot get through life without having our dignity violated. And the third is mindfulness, and by that I mean noticing our thoughts and emotions without becoming overly attached to them and clinging to them and letting them become in our protoplasm or avoiding them and shoving them away. So mindfulness means accepting and noticing our emotions. That might be noticing something happened, like a boundary was crossed, or that we didn't show up as our best selves. Is everybody up for a short guided meditation? All right, I'm going to sit with you. Even if you're not participating, if you can avoid looking around the room, that is a compassionate way to help other people feel safe. So I'd love to have you. I would love to have you start by sitting upright in your chair, both feet on the floor, and your hands can be on your knees or wherever they feel most comfortable. If you feel comfortable, you can close your eyes. You do not have to, but you may want to lower your eyes and soften your gaze. And we'll start with just taking a couple deep breaths, feeling where you feel the breath most strongly. Feeling your body connected to the chair, your feet on the floor. Just taking a moment to be fully present. And now I'm going to ask you to bring to mind a situation that's been difficult. It might be earlier today or yesterday, or something that's been going on for a long time. Just bring that situation to mind. And now I'm going to say some phrases that you can repeat it to yourself and use language that's useful to you. You may want to put your hands on your heart. If you're being called to fierce self-compassion, you may want to put your fist over your heart and then your hand over your fist. This is a moment of suffering. This is really hard. Of course you're upset. What happened was wrong. What happened to you was wrong, and it's hard. I am part of humanity. I am not alone. Suffering is part of life. And now we're going to practice some self-kindness. Feel the warmth of your hands on your heart or your knees, wherever you've placed your hands. May I be kind to myself. May I regain clarity on what I need in this moment. Perhaps may I be brave. And you may want to call yourself by a sweet name, something you might call a child. Oh, darling, or sweetheart. This is hard. And we'll just take a moment to connect to those self-compassion phrases and our common humanity. And our breath. And when you're ready, but not before, you can open your eyes and make some subtle movements in the body. Thank you for holding this space for each other. That felt sacred to me. It is almost 11:30. Does anybody have any reaction to what that was like for them? Yes.
I actually wanted to say something different than a response to what.
Of course.
I think one of the issues for me about suffering is related to the sense of living a privileged life and not suffering like other people suffer. And so I feel it's self-absorbed to think I'm suffering when there is radical suffering in the world. So that's an issue for me. And at the beginning of the exercise, thinking about what did you suffer, what is the suffering that you've had recently? I was thinking nothing rises to the level that I think is meant by the word suffering.
Thank you for sharing that. I'll repeat that. The sense of suffering when we have so much, when we know where we're sleeping tonight, when I know my next meal is coming, what really suffering do I have? Do you witness the world in pain?
Oh, yeah.
So you're suffering. Your own suffering, that threatens the intactness of your whole. To see people suffering and to feel powerless, that is a form of suffering. I know I see your face. Do you cry when you watch videos of things that are going on in the world? And you cry because?
Well, I don't want to be on the hot seat.
I don't mean to put. I call it the snug. Yes, I call it the snug. Yes. Yes, and also we're suffering because we're a common humanity. We're suffering because they are us. Right? They're our brothers and sisters. Those are our children being killed. Those are our sisters being raped. That is suffering. That's why we weep. So I understand what you're saying, and I think it also gets tricky with gratitude, right? I don't think we should need other people to suffer to be grateful. I think gratitude needs to be for the person who smiled at us, the kindness of other people. There's at least gratitude that I don't like, and it's a similar thing. We require other people to suffer to be grateful. So at least my hair is not on fire. It doesn't sound like gratitude to me. It sounds like compare and despair. So thank you for sharing that. I think you speak for a lot of people, a lot of tender hearts, but you are suffering. It's threatening your ability to feel joy. My 23-year-old is suffering because of what's happening around the world, and she is not living a joyful life. And she's the one who showed the video of Kristen Neff talking about it. So, my wish for her is that she can practice self-compassion. She is a child of God, that she doesn't need to hurt to help other people. She'll give all her money away. She's given money, so she's had nothing, and then Mom sends money by Venmo. I can't have my child starve. Well, thank you all for being here for each other. Thanks for your attention. Yeah, we have two things to hand out. One is a list that Cindy's put together of books on self-care, which is a little different from self-compassion but relates. And then my full handout with references and how to reach me. And I also brought some of my cards, because you can't make cards and then not give them out, right? So here's one of this.
Well, and I'm just going to do this now, but it's not saying go out. Okay, I'm just going to give her this gift, which is a small thank you. From the Adult First Faith Foundation that symbolically is meant to remind you of the light you're putting out in the world. But please stay and have conversation, because I think this is the more informal part. This sort of formally bookends.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for coming. I'm here until you need to leave, and please come and say hi. Take a card. They're very pretty. Listen to my podcast, The Dignity Lab, anywhere that you get your podcasts. Both Monica and Jane will be on soon as guests, so.
I'm going to put this up here.
Oh, thank you. You're Martha. Nice to meet you. Oh, you're Stephen Minister.